Seems fair to me.
Donnybrook is made possible by the support of the Betsy and Thomas Patterson Foundation and the members of 9PBS.
Thanks for joining us for another edition of Donnybrook. Good to have you with us. We sure appreciate it. Some big issues appearing on the ballot in Missouri in November among our topics for this edition. But first, let's meet the panelists, starting with Wendy Wiese from the Big 550 KTRS, Bill McClellan from the Major Daily, the Post-Dispatch, from STLtoday.com and the Post-Dispatch, Joe Holleman, and from the St. Louis American, Alvin Reid. Well, Bill, there was a lot of back and forth when it came to the abortion amendment for the Missouri ballot November the 5th. And then, with 3 hours to go before the ballots were to be printed, the Missouri Supreme Court okayed this amendment, which would restore a woman's right to have an abortion in the state of Missouri. This is the state that was the first one to repeal it after the 2022 repeal of Roe versus Wade. They collected, supporters of this amendment, 380,000 signatures, twice as many as necessary, and more than any other initiative in the state of Missouri. So the question is that big momentum going to produce different results? Or what will be the result of this November 5th ballot measure?
Well, first let me say that some of those 380,000 signatures were collected by my wife. So I'm not without bias in this, but I think that the result will be that the amendment will pass, but I don't think there'll be any political ramifications because Missourians have an innate ability to vote for people who oppose what they believe in. So I think that people will, for instance, vote for the amendment to keep abortion legal, and will turn around and vote for Josh Hawley, who's worked forever against it. That's just the way Missouri is. Maybe there'll be some people in the 2nd District who are a little more swing state-ish, who it might help, like Ray Hartman, for instance, who is pro-choice, and Ann Wagner, who's, pro-life, could possibly be hurt. But I don't think it'll have a tremendous political impact.
I agree with you, and Kansas, Ohio, other states like that have followed that exact pattern. If you looked at the number of people who voted to, protect reproductive rights, and then look at the whatever poll it is for president or for the senatorial seats, it's much more closer than that election. So we're not alone in that. I do want to give a shout out to our reporter, Sylvester Brown. He was one of the journalists, I'm sure you had them too, who had to write a story 3 times in 72 hours. It went from, we're going to vote on this in November to this, to this, to this, and you're on a deadline on a Tuesday, which is pretty much our deadline, so it made for some, journalistically. And, I agree with, like I said, I agree with you, Bill. I also thought, and regardless of where I may stand on the issue, I thought that the case that was presented to Judge Limbaugh in the first place was not as wacky as some people made it out to be. I honestly thought that the Supreme Court could possibly come back and say that it would not be voted on this time until they got the ballot measure clear. But that didn't happen. I don't want to say I didn't think it would happen, but it wasn't like just some made up out of the air kind of opposition to it.
I think that I agree with Bill on a couple of points. One is I don't think it'll make much of a difference in individual candidate versus candidate. And I think for the very reason that Bill mentioned, Missouri, which has been considered a conservative state for a long time, has twice defeated right-to-work laws, which are considered to be very liberal, pro-union, and then turned around and voted for a bunch of Republicans. Because I think some issues, I would think hopefully to everybody, but with Missourians, like abortion, even though the Democrats and the Republicans don't want you to believe this, there are people who hold differing opinions from the party that they follow. There are pro-life Democrats and there are pro-choice Republicans. So they'll go out there and vote conscience, if you will, and then turn right around and vote for all the Republicans or all the Democrats.
But isn't it true that right to work issue was on the August ballot, and then a different group of voters maybe go out to vote in November? I think what a lot of Democrats are hoping anyway is that this is going to bring people out of the woodwork who heretofore haven't voted or wouldn't ordinarily vote.
You know, there's always an issue that everybody thinks is going to bring people out of the woodwork, and nothing ever brings people out of the woodwork. I mean, we look at voter turnouts, and we talk it's a big deal when 30% show up.
That is so true, and they have, you know, maybe it'll be too cold or it'll be too warm or, you know, any number of reasons. And you're absolutely right, Bill, because I remember talking to a friend who was pro-life, but she voted for Claire McCaskill, and I don't know if that happens in other states, but it is certainly something.
Well, my favorite one here was when the Prison Guard Association endorsed Eric Greitens, who was in favor of right to work, over Chris Koster, who was, you know, a Democrat, but a former Republican and not at all an Orthodox Democrat, and he was supported even by the NRA. And I asked one of the guys in the Prison Guard Association, you know, what are you thinking? And he said, well, you know, our union's made up of a lot of small town guys, and they just don't want to support a Democrat. So they voted for Eric Greitens, and the next thing you know, they're feuding with the state because they lost their ability to take dues out.
I think it's kind of funny that there's people who seem to be surprised that there's people who can actually think outside of party lines. And I think there's a lot of people who do. And so that's why they're... So when you say, will it bring people out of the woodwork, you don't know who it's bringing out of the woodwork.
Well, that's true. And I think, though, that the issue for putting the amendment on the ballot has momentum because Hawley, who you referenced, officially recently he said he's going to leave it up to the voters.
Well, he has no choice. I mean, he has to leave it up to the voters. They're voting on it.
I know, but he's not being an advocate for one side or the other.
Oh, well, he's got Joshua always has
so he knows. Well,
finger in the wind.
Isn't that what Donald Trump was taking? Isn't that what Donald Trump was taking credit for the other night? How it deserves to go back to the states and the voters in the states.
Hey, Alvin, I want to ask you about the St. Louis Public Schools. The Post-Dispatch is reporting that 4 weeks into the school year, the transportation woes still continue. Some kids are getting home after 6 o'clock at night. And one report, I don't know if it was verified, one of the students urinated on the bus because the ride was too long. And of course, on buses, there are no restroom facilities. But at the same time, the school committee met on Tuesday for the purpose of approving minutes, 15 meetings worth of minutes that went back to June of 2023 because they hadn't done it. And when they didn't approve the minutes, they weren't able to post them online, so no one knew what was going on. They've changed the opening day attendance figures. Some on social media, I haven't seen any leaders asking for this, but some on social media have said, you know, it's time for the state to take over the St. Louis Public Schools because we haven't even mentioned in this list of woes, you know, that 20% of the kids are studying reading at grade level and 15% are proficient in mathematics, which is a whole different issue. Do you think it's time for the state to step in?
No, because, well, the state is auditing the district. The city, beginning, I guess, with the mayor's office, has called for an audit and just to let's get, not to the bottom of the academic, but let's get to the bottom of the, you know, fiduciary irresponsibility. That's important, okay? I think that, once again, you find yourself at a point where I think the citizens of the city of St. Louis will overturn this board. They will be leaving. I have also just been, you know, the reactions of some of the leaders, and I want to go back to the school board meeting, I think on the Tuesday after school began, where Tony Cousins ran through a list of things that you didn't read about, and the media is unfair because you didn't read about this. And I'm reading the story, and I said, like, oh, well, you read that in the St. Louis American, and she listed about 5 things that we had covered and reported on. So when you're throwing just stuff and seeing what'll stick, that doesn't work, you know? And how about somebody step up and really start leading instead of start battling because it's problems.
Well, when parents don't know where their babies are, and you've got a really glib attitude about the reaction in the media, that's problematic. Tom Davis?
Matt Davis.
Matt Davis, sorry. I keep wanting to call him Tom Davis. Talking about the fact that the haters in the vice president of the board, the haters in the media, you have some very serious problems that need to be addressed. And this, you know, getting up on your haunches and taking on members of the Fourth Estate doesn't do you any favors at all. This is dereliction of duty. They can't get out of there fast enough.
Well, you know, and I'd like to take this opportunity to criticize our reporter, Blythe Bernard, who had the audacity to report that somehow the district lost $40 million, that the district can't get kids to school, that the board hasn't published minutes in months upon months. I think it's just ridiculous that the school board's trying to blame the reporting at the Post-Dispatch.
That's right.
And the good work of Ms. Bernard.
52 million, but who's counting?
And trying to make it sound like, well, you didn't talk about this great program you have. Where's the missing $50 million?
Should the state
start with that? I don't care about your program.
Should the state come in?
How do you
And
go from a
instead that Matt
surplus?
Davis talks about the pearl clutchers and the haters and the classists and the racists. I mean, this is supposed to be about the schools, Mr. Davis, and if people aren't flattering you enough, that's too bad.
But are we doing enough? People are asking for leaders. In 2021, when there was a bus driver shortage in Boston, they sent in the Massachusetts National Guard to drive buses. Now, if we can't find drivers for Central States or whatever, should we bring in the National Guard?
Well, I mean, for transport, whatever you need to do to get the kids to school
Safely.
on
You can't
time
teach an empty seat.
and back at a decent time. Yes, those steps need to be taken.
I think we're seeing a level of brokenness here.
Oh, my God.
That really should aggravate everybody, regardless of what your position is on public education. With that vast amount of missing money, with the amount of hiring a new superintendent who did nothing but hire cronies in, there should be not only Fitzpatrick auditing it, there should be a criminal investigation.
Yes.
And as you said, we're sitting here talking about, well, the haters. You can't get kids to school. So I don't want to hear anything else from you until you figured out how to get the actual kids you're supposed to be serving into a seat so that the hardworking teachers can actually teach them something.
Joe, let me ask.
I was going to say it was another point that Davis and Cousins made in their essay, that hiring Dr. Scarlett was a high-risk thing, and they knew it. Well, if they knew that, if they knew that, why didn't they keep an eye on it?
Yeah, putting my child in an Uber is also high risk.
Yeah, I mean,
So that high risk blew up in your face, and now that's Blythe Bernard and the Post-Dispatch's fault.
They said it wasn't low risk. That's what.
Or arrogant.
Okay.
Yeah.
Hey, Joe, let me ask you about the St. Louis Development Corporation, which has a lot of pandemic money to dole out. And originally speaking, it was to go to major corridors in North St. Louis to enhance businesses and the economy there. Then St. Louis Alderwoman Shameen Clark Hubbard changed the rules so that more parts of North St. Louis could benefit from that. As it turns out, at least two members of her family are getting some money. Her father-in-law, Rodney, and then his granddaughter. Her granddaughter's getting about $740,000, I believe, in pandemic money. But the people who sat on the SLDC, at least two of them, Matt McBride and Laura Gilbert, are saying they don't know what the money was for. They were given a day to do their due diligence for $37 million in grants. And to this day, the SLDC won't release to the Post-Dispatch what this grant money is being used for.
Well, to quote Claude Rains from Casablanca, I'm shocked, I say, that somehow a person on a board changed the rules, and the eventual outcome was that it's a member of her family's, it was easier to get money. Actually, what I'm really shocked about is that anybody's shocked about this anymore at all. This is, and not just in St. Louis, but this is how government does business. And those people with influence never go away, and they funnel the money to the people they're connected with. And the idea that say, well, we don't want to release those records because it's a contract still in negotiations. You know, the great thing about politicians, they write laws that always have escape clauses so that you can illegally avoid the law. And so now you just say, well, that's a contract. We're negotiating it. We're negotiating it. The problem is you're not telling anybody what's happening. If you have the two members who say, we didn't get the paperwork in time, we didn't get the information in time, so let's all rubber stamp this. And there are pressure on these boards to do exactly that. To get along, you go along. And lo and behold, some politically connected families get money. That's almost not news anymore.
But as the attorney Mark Pedroli pointed out, a grant is not a contract. So, that doesn't apply. It sounds good, or maybe it looks good to some people, but that doesn't apply.
What got me is that the granddaughter of
Hubbard,
of Rodney Hubbard Sr., she started her not-for-profit, which is called the People Project, 30 days after the money was made available to her group. It kind of reminded me of George Costanza's fraudulent not-for-profit, the Human Corporation.
Yes.
Where, on Seinfeld, where he kind of came up with a not-for-profit to kind of meet the needs because there was money there. The People Project, what's that all about?
Right.
But we don't know because they're not releasing...
Right. I would just say, Joe, you're 100% right that it's the way government works. But what we should demand is that at least we want to know who's getting the money and how much.
And what it's going to be used for.
That doesn't seem like...
Because any grant, you have to specify what the grant is used for. Because most of the people that give a grant say it has to be used for this. So I think there's answers there that it would just be nice to know them. I will say SLDC does some great work. They have just kind of, I guess, taken over or taken charge of the minority business certification. I just don't like stuff like this because it makes it look so bad, and they do good stuff. So I just hate that we find ourselves.
Don't do the bad stuff.
Right, they say that's what I'm saying. Like,
right.
come on, you're doing so well.
Yeah.
Somebody needed to say, like, all right. So the Hubbards got a contract. You do know that this will reflect poorly on us, whether we do it well, we do it right. We're not saying that Rodney Hubbard and the crew are bad people, but. Come on, let's think this out. And I don't know why we don't do that.
Was there too much pandemic money thrown out in too little time? I mean, we had Connie Bobo, we had Tony Weaver.
I understand
that. How about that one reverend who was taking a helicopter between Sunday services?
I think they arrested her the other day, or somebody out there in St. Charles. But here's the thing, Charlie. That broad brush, and it can be broad because there's a whole bunch of people clipping, and there's a whole bunch of people who never, ever got caught that probably did worse. But I still will judge everyone individually, and I can't say that it was too much money or whatever because we had never, ever been through anything like that before.
Well, and we hadn't, but the money was just, when you handed that much money to government, it was literally like Christmas morning.
Yeah.
Although we haven't spent all of ours yet.
Right.
Well, we're figuring out how to do that.
Well, that's the whole thing. They got to spend it with this looming deadline.
No, they spent it on this, and we got questions about it.
Well, and you know what's going to happen?
Save it because we've got lots to talk about. Wendy, I want to ask you about the St. Louis Health Department. Just a couple of weeks after the prosecutor, yes, I'm sorry, you're right, St. Louis County Health Department, a couple weeks ago, the prosecuting attorney for St. Louis County called for Dennis Hancock, a member of the county council, to resign because he had hired his wife. Now it turns out that a member of the executive branch, the county health director, Dr. Kanika Cunningham, had a daughter who was kind of an undercover agent trying to buy cigarettes to see if they would sell to her. She was underage. Right. Actually, kind of an interesting public service. Well, anyway, this daughter was working in the mother's department. The mother actually sent out some emails asking for her and her colleagues to get a pay raise. Does she need to go?
I hate to be, so awful about this, but yes, for all of the stories that we have had tonight about lack of oversight, the fact that we just keep moving that line of right and wrong, and there's exceptions here, there's exceptions there. We can't expect any better from anybody if we don't start enforcing the laws of the state. As Wesley Bell said, it's not just elected officials. It also applies to employees, whether that is Sophia Ave, who was inspecting pools, the daughter of the former health department spokesperson. Yes, I mean, I think these people have to go. That is the only way it's going to stop. And I hate saying that. I truly do. But if you are aware, I am aware that when a microphone is on, there are things that I'm not allowed to say. If you are working at the county government center, you have to be aware of the rules. If you're not, then shame on you.
I'll lead a drive to change the Constitution. I just can't get worked up at all about nepotism. I mean, maybe it's because I grew up in Chicago. Right. When Mayor Daley was caught steering money to his family, he said, "What kind of world is this if a man can't help his own family?" Right. And you know, okay, so Christopher Ave's daughter got hired by the county health department, and the doctor hired her daughter. I just don't get exercise, and I didn't get exercised about
Dennis Hancock. That's correct. That's correct. You're consistent.
You know, on my position, and I have a column that was just online today about it, and I don't see it as all that big of a deal either with Hancock, and I generally see what Bill is saying. I mean, what I thought this all was kind of struck me as was a parting shot by Wesley Bell to take a shot at Dennis Hancock. Hancock's a Republican, Bell's a Democrat. Hancock had been pretty critical of Bell's office over the hiring of Sam Alton and letting him moonlight and doing that, so he had the hearings on it. So I thought that this was a case of it was playing politics. Problem is, if you're going to grab a can of worms called nepotism in government, everybody's, you know, I think I said on the show here before, the government is littered with the bodies of relatives. And it's the truth. Problem is they're usually smarter about it. I don't hire my kid in my department. I get my other department head friend to hire them, and then I hire her daughter in my department. It's sleazy, but it's legal.
I just don't understand how I was just one of these people that I would tell my family the day I got elected, well, this is kind of the worst thing that happened to you because you can't work for county government.
That's right.
All right.
That's
or
right.
you can't work for the city government. That's until I'm not in office. Everybody good with that?
Well,
and that's
well, maybe they become lobbyists then. I mean, like Blunt's family, bunch of lobbyists.
Blade's
family.
If I don't want a Reid involved with anything this Reid is trying to govern over or about, that's just so simple to me.
We need more Reids in government.
I don't know in the case of Dennis Hancock, when you know you've got this tit for tat with Wesley Bell, why in the world would you hire your stepdaughter?
Because he said he didn't know.
Shame on him.
Shame on him.
And I know he's a great man. He's greatly respected. But how can you not know?
I would just like to know, does the county send out notices? You know, like once a year, don't forget, folks, here are the rules. And if the county doesn't, I can understand why people wouldn't know that you can't, you know, it's not a
Well, and here's a way to look at it.
That's
Hold that thought again, because we have too many topics and too little time. Alvin, Reid, sports betting is going on the ballot in November in the state of Missouri. 37 states already have it. I think I have that right, 37. At the same time, another gambling measure, a casino at the Lake of the Ozarks, will also be in front of the voters. Although a couple of professors at your esteemed alma mater, which lost to Illinois on Sunday,
according to Bill,
Saturday night, I was there.
This is a good report because the two KU professors said that they engage in sports betting, but they admit it affects the poor, the most vulnerable, the most negatively.
Lack of money affects poor people more than it does with people with money. You don't have to be a college professor, and even at a fine institution like KU, to figure that out. Okay, so what is that study about? You know, all right. North Carolina once had a study that said that people who go to college make more money than people who don't go to college. All right, great, whatever that proves. No, come on, it's time. Let these people down in wherever vote on their casino thing. I don't even know why we can have them every place else, but we cannot have them in the Lake of the Ozarks because that's just like, what, a Puritan community down that way?
Yes, absolutely. Keep the sports betting where it belongs, in bars where maybe people are still smoking or drinking as God intended. Keep the families on the Jolly Giant slides at the Lake of the Ozarks. No gambling at the Lake of the Ozarks.
Do you know that churches have fantasy leagues, fantasy football leagues?
Churches have bingo games.
All right, I'm just
Churches have
saying,
been
like,
gambling
yeah.
since time immemorial.
I think churches were the biggest losers when casinos came aboard
that's
because
probably
no one
true.
went to play bingo
games
anymore.
dried up.
probably true.
Bingo
Right.
games dried up.
No, I think the KU professors do have a point, though. I mean, if it hurts vulnerable families,
Don't
then
gamble.
Why are we
But
so
they're
exciting
gambling
about it?
because they're
Everything
vulnerable.
hurts vulnerable families. Drinking hurts vulnerable
It does.
families.
Yeah.
So does smoking.
Gambling, smoking,
right.
yeah.
So let's outlaw it all.
Right.
Right.
And you don't want them to not
tried
having
that,
money.
didn't they?
All right, okay. Let's go to the letters and see what the viewers had to say about last week's great program. The art fair is supposed to be a cultural affair, not a political debate. While it is regrettable that 6 Jewish hostages were killed, so were over 40,000 Palestinians, thousands of them children. That from Erkin Baker of Godfrey, Illinois. Charlie Brennan thinks the speaker series will remain at the factory and not return to Powell Hall next year. I hope not. I don't like the traffic jams and the slow entry process while standing outside the factory. Powell Hall does a much better job. That from Lynn Heater of South County. And we got this call on the 9 line.
So, a Palestinian dance troupe should not be allowed to perform at the St. Louis Art Fair in light of the sensitivities of some Jewish people, given Hamas's recent and horrendous murder of 6 hostages in Gaza. Was the dance troupe involved in the murders or expressed support for them? This rationale is illogical at best and prejudice at worst. Thank you.
That from Felix Miller of Clayton. You can write us, care of 9PBS, 63108. Don't forget those emails, Donnybrook@9pbs.org. On social media, use hashtag DonnybrookSTL. And call that 9 line, won't you, at 314-512-9094. And don't forget to listen to us on your favorite podcast source. That's it for this week's edition of Donnybrook. Thank you so much for joining us. We'll see you next week at this time.
Donnybrook is made possible by the support of the Betsy and Thomas Patterson Foundation and the members of 9PBS.